You know, in the world of geopolitics, there's always the official story, and then there's the other one, the one you hear whispered. Well, today we're diving into a massive military operation where those two stories are just worlds apart. And it all kicks off with this one single, pretty shocking number: 155. Let that sink in for a second. According to the sources we're looking at, that's how many US aircraft were supposedly sent on one single mission over Iran. I mean, that is a massive aerial armada. But the official reason why they were all there, well, that's where things get really interesting. So, what was the official story? Get this. That entire force was scrambled to save one pilot. Just one. An incredible show of force for a single life, right? So, okay, let's unpack that official story first. All right, so first up, we're gonna look at the narrative coming from the US, based on the sources we've analyzed. And it's a story of a really big, high-stakes rescue mission. I mean, just look at the sheer scale of this supposed rescue force. We're talking about 64 fighter jets, 4 bombers, 48 refueling tankers, 13 dedicated rescue aircraft, plus an entire F-15E squadron and a bunch of C-130s and Blackhawks. That is an insane amount of military hardware, all for one person. And the official claim, which our sources quote, is that it was a complete success. The pilot was found, brought home safe and sound. A really powerful message, right? A demonstration of American military power and its commitment to its people. But here's where things take a sharp turn. The sources we're digging into, well, they ask a pretty simple question. Does this story really add up? They argue that a mission this huge for just one person seems, frankly, unbelievable. And they put forward a completely different version of what went down. And that brings us to the second story. This wasn't a rescue, they claim. It was a covert operation to steal nuclear material. Yeah, the sources we're looking at frame this whole thing in almost cinematic terms. It wasn't a rescue mission. It was a high-risk heist, a secret plan that sounds like it was ripped straight from a Hollywood script. And what was the prize they were supposedly after? 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. Now, to give you some idea of what that means, the sources say that's enough material to build up to 10 atomic bombs. A huge deal. The plan they describe was just incredibly audacious. According to these sources, the goal was to hit nuclear sites in Isfahan and Bushehr, fly in special forces on C-130s, grab the uranium, and maybe even capture or arrest some Iranian nuclear scientists while they were at it. So right there, you have two completely different stories about the mission itself. It's probably no surprise then that the claimed outcomes are also polar opposites. One side is saying total success, and the other is calling it a complete and utter disaster. And this really shows you how far apart these two narratives are. You've got the official US story, successful rescue, pilot safe, everybody came home. Then you have the accusation from the sources, catastrophic failure, the mission was stopped by Iran, and tons of aircraft were destroyed. One of our sources puts it very bluntly with this quote. It suggests this wasn't just a mission that failed, it was a devastating defeat with major losses of life and equipment. And the sources get really specific about these supposed losses. They're talking C-130 transport planes and helicopters destroyed right on the ground, F-15 fighter jets shot down. They even claim that Iran has video of the wreckage. And get this, in a really wild twist, they say the US destroyed some of its own aircraft as they were retreating, just to hide secret technology and the real scope of the disaster. And to back up their side, the sources raise what they see as a really critical question to challenge the official story. They ask, where's the proof? They point out that, in the past, the US has been pretty quick to release footage of big, successful operations. So if this was such a heroic rescue, why haven't we seen a single photo or a video clip of the pilot who was supposedly saved? Okay, so to really get why these two stories are so different and so fiercely defended, you kind of have to zoom out. The sources we're looking at argue that you can't see this as just a one-off event. It's all tied into the long, complicated history of deep mistrust between the US and Iran. And this timeline gives us some really important context. So back in 2015, you have the JCPOA nuclear deal. Everyone saw that as a huge diplomatic win. But then, just a few years later in 2018, the US pulls out all on its own. Now, the sources we've looked at point to that moment as a key reason why Iran is just so skeptical of any diplomatic moves from the US today, including any talk about ceasefires. And this quote, which comes from an Iranian journalist mentioned in our source material, really sums up that whole feeling. It shows a belief that any talk of a truce is just a tactic, a trick, a way for the enemy to catch its breath and regroup. That's the lens they're using to view US actions. So the really important thing to take away here is that according to these sources, this whole thing isn't just about one mission on one night. It's about decades of bad blood and a total lack of trust that just poisons every single interaction. And that's why an event like this becomes a huge information war, where the story you tell can be just as important as what actually happened on the ground. Which brings us right back to this central question, doesn't it? On one side, you have the official story of a heroic rescue, and on the other, a wild accusation of a failed nuclear heist and a massive cover-up. These are two stories that just can't both be true, and it forces you to ask, what really happened? Because in today's world of high-stakes geopolitics, figuring out who to believe and, more importantly, why, has never been more critical.